This interview was, for me, peak. I know it's a couple weeks old, but when people make actual content, I like to let the dust settle before I speak about it. With political commentary, it's mostly to collect my thoughts before making a clown out of myself, but I also try to avoid parasitizing other people's work. Now, I've rewatched it since then, and it's more than most people care to mention. This interview was orchestrated from beginning to end with the intent to deign Musk as not just a malcontent, but the general of malcontents, the king of them, the god whom at the altar of X they worship. But it backfired. Leftist ideals are founded on an imagined boogeyman of pure evil, a need for an oppressor, and they've attached it to what they think most embodies that, straight white men. But when speaking to one, Musk, they realize that he's just normal, despite the fact that they've made him into their boogeyman. Absurdly wealthy, but normal. Actually, that's the weirdest thing about him, and I think the left hates that fact most of all. And quick disclaimer, this is a long interview and I'm cutting out some of the innards and stuttering to quicken the pace, but I'm not rearranging anything or providing it out of context. The whole video, which I highly recommend watching, will be linked below. Right, so this interview perfectly displays a normal modern white woman and a normal modern white man's typical views on modern politics. Its framing and pacing might be machinated for the sake of drama, but the speech itself shows how we are predisposed to presumptions based on our preferred echo chambers, as they both make false assumptions about each other. And while this interview is a scrumptious eat till you're about to pop fully planned 3-course meal, it does take some ramping up to get to the good part. However, that doesn't mean the appetizer is boring. It's actually quite important to fully appreciate the main dish, so even though it won't be in my video, it's important to understand what they did here. The first 41 minutes are spent speaking about AI, economic warfare, and wealth, something you would expect to be mentioned regarding Musk, and therefore it's something which seems irrelevant at first, innocuous at first, to the highly discussed ending where they debate racism and immigration. However, the first half of the interview, which I'm not showing, is actually a clever setup to determine Musk, in the minds of the audience, as an incredibly powerful man, and they want to do that so as to define him as a great evil later in the video. Their very next video is even titled, "Do Billionaires Deserve Their Wealth?" Though that may just be capitalizing on the current fad rather than specifically targeting Musk. And at the 41-minute mark, with Musk's power well established as an evil person, the interview transitions into something of an accusation. This is where we begin. Ding ding, dinner is served.
People think that the direction of the world is being shaped by a very small number of incredibly powerful people, and you are right at the top of that list.
So what else is? But is this different from the past?
I agree with you. I think it was like that.
when wasn't that the case?
It was ever thus, but
it was ever thus. Exactly.
It is as you've described very vividly. It's an incredibly rapid change. And so let's start with control of your company, which you definitely have now. After the IPO, you have 80% odd of voting shares, and as I understand it, you can only be removed by a vote of shares which you yourself control. So tell me if I'm wrong, but I think you can go crazy.
There's a few companies in that bucket, by the way. The AI companies, like Google's in that bucket. Alphabet is controlled by Larry and Sergey.
But I think yours is more extreme. The inability
it's the same level of.
So the dynamic shift in the interview happens with the accusation that Musk's control over his company is more extreme than any other company, to suggest that he's a power-mad tyrant with no thought to if he's actually doing anything bad, only that it must be a bad thing because he has so much control, because of course dictators are evil, right? Simply having the power in and of itself makes him evil, which is not actually true. This is the very modern leftist hill, that power in and of itself is evil, and Musk retaliates by citing equal examples and explaining how his company works, much of which I've cut out from the video, but the point of the question is clear. To mark Musk as someone corrupted by money and power, someone whose political influence needs to be measured, to be reined in. Skipping past the longer aspects of the conversation, we can see the question manifested verbatim.
Through Starlink, incredible geopolitical power. I mean, I'm one of your customers.
Thank you.
Excellent product.
Great.
But without them, the Ukrainians would have been in serious trouble. These are geopolitical decisions of consequence. How do you feel about having that power? You can determine the outcome of wars. How does that feel? And is it right that you should have that power?
Well, I'm not sure we're determining the ultimate outcome of the, say the war in Ukraine.
And do you think it's your responsibility to play a role in tipping the scales towards what you see as the right way to peace?
I've been advocating peace for a long time. I posted a few years ago that there really needs to be some concession here to Russia. This is not me being pro-Russia. I'm just being pragmatic. Or people will die for years with nothing achieved, and that is exactly what happened.
But my point is not so much about
Ukraine
what
is not going to retake those territories. It is not going to happen.
My interest is really on whether you think, given that you have through Starlink, you have an incredible power, whether it's appropriate that you should wield it. And that's quite rare, that an individual actor has such power by turning on and off a capability to shape conflict.
Well, is there something you think I should do differently?
I mean, I think you were right to support Ukraine. I think that, as it won't surprise you, I think that the Russian aggression was, for many, many reasons, an appalling aggression. And I think that was an important thing that you did.
So she's asking about the Ukraine war and Starlink, which is a fair question. It's tantalizing for the audience, at least, especially given the leftist narrative that he was aiding Russia. As for the response, well, I'm not sure if he's trying to avoid her question deliberately or if he's attempting to give context to a very complicated query, but he whimsies for a bit regarding the topic. He's slow to answer a lot of the questions on account of being thoughtful about them, but here he keeps getting off topic. Then, upon being asked the third or fourth time, he doesn't answer, but instead asks her if she thinks there's something that she thinks that he should have done different regarding it, which sort of sunlocks her. I mean, I guess it would. It's easy to perceive something wrong and demand justice, but when it's you distributing the food to the hungry people, justice gets a bit blurry.
It's a similar tone, I think, about domestic politics, where you've played a big role domestically, politically here. You spent a lot of money on Donald Trump's re-election. After the election, you got very actively involved. Through Doge, you tried to cut a lot of spending, reshape the government. How do you feel that it wasn't hugely successful in the sense that, there wasn't nearly as much spending cut as you tried? How do you, as you look back on that, do you regret getting so involved in politics? Do you think it was a good thing to do?
I think I got a little too involved in politics, got carried away, frankly. Over and over that we're told we need to wire money for some sort of important cause in Africa. And we're like, okay, but the wiring instructions are to Deloitte and Touche in D.C., in Washington, D.C., not to Africa. So we would like to send the money to Africa. Can you please connect us with the recipients so we can send them the money directly? And then we'd get silence.
We don't need to relitigate Doge. I have no doubt that there's a lot of waste in the U.S. government. I think probably
much worse than anyone could possibly imagine.
But the way, I think it is a fair criticism that the way you shut down a whole bunch of programs probably, in fact, certainly caused unnecessary suffering. I mean,
no.
No?
No.
You don't buy that at all?
It caused a lot of complaining.
You're watching my interview with Elon Musk. If you want to get early access to other interviews, subscribe to The Economist by clicking the link above. Now, back to the interview. You don't buy the idea that anybody, to put it really crudely and simply, any kid in Africa died because of the suddenness with which...
Zero.
I just don't think that's right. I just don't think... I've had people reporting in Africa...
Now it's moved on to Doge and USAID, where she hammers on the nail that Doge and its figurehead, Musk, are responsible for the deaths of at least some African kids who were to be aided by these programs. Musk insists bluntly that the money and goods were not entirely being sent to Africa, but rather to places in America. There's some back and forth here, but it's a he said, she said between a man who saw the files and a news editor from another country, and the people listening, like myself, cannot make heads or tails of it truthfully, as we don't have classified documents, but it's worth keeping in as a signpost for how these are all typical leftist through lines with nothing to really back them up. From here on, we're looking at dessert. Social politics, my favorite.
Well, first of all, you support not just the populist right, but the far right. In fact, very fringe parties in some countries.
No, I support the normal people.
Okay.
What do you call the far right? Falsely.
You think is the normal person. Okay.
Yes.
I
Literally.
agree. No, I agree that the center of gravity in this country has shifted. Certainly, the Democratic Party shifted to the left. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people like Rupert
Not
Lowe. I'm
fringe
talking
right,
about
please.
people.
It's actually just normal people.
The-
It's just normal people. It's just normal people. And and here are the principles. And tell me which of these sound terrible. That we should have secure borders. That we should have safe cities. That we should have sensible spending. Which of those three are far right
Those
fringe?
three. No,
And I would like to just admonish you and the media for the absurd characterization of the far right. It is false and misleading and nonsense.
There's an aspect of leftists where they believe anyone who disagrees with anything they say must be an extremist, pushing the craziest of ideals. And even though she agrees that the left has become more left, this aspect is unfortunately on display here as she claims he supports the fringe right. I don't even know what fringe implies, like Jake Monroe maybe, a goth righty nationalist? Yeah, that's fringe, but only because he's goth. Otherwise, it's just normal, which is what Elon says in response. They'll dance to this tune more than once in the interview, so pay attention.
Now, Elon, you have, what is it, close to 250 million followers on X.
Yeah, because I'm
You say things like,
a popular guy.
quote, civil war in Britain is inevitable, just a question
On the current
of when.
trends, yes.
I mean, when were you last in the UK?
A few years ago.
Exactly. So I live there. I'm there the whole time. That is nonsense.
You live a cloistered existence.
No, I don't, actually. And the numbers also disprove what you say.
What numbers?
All the numbers about crime. London is a much safer city than any city in the United States. Violent crime in the UK is not where you think it is. In fact, it's coming down. You have painted, and because you have so many followers, so many Americans believe it, a kind of view that Europe and the UK are kind of, overrun with terrifying Muslim immigrants. There's rape on every corner. There's a sort of civilizational destruction.
I haven't said any of those things.
Just not, well, you say civil war in Britain is inevitable. And
Yes,
then,
if current trends continue, it is.
why?
Well, if you have a large and rapidly growing group of people whose beliefs are antithetical to Western beliefs, at some point there will be a reckoning. They will try to implement their views, and those who oppose it will oppose it, and that's what you call civil war.
You're clearly suggesting Europe is a dystopian place, and you...
Yes, I mean, why aren't you doing more to fight censorship in Europe? Why aren't you? You seem to be doing nothing to fight censorship in Europe.
That's not true. I think that
they put
there
people
are issues
in
with free
prison in the
speech
UK for social media posts. Do you think that's appropriate?
No, and we've written editorials against it. But
Okay,
I don't
great.
think...
This is a footnote for posterity here, as it will come up repeatedly in the future. Crime statistics, Musk's popularity, where you live dictating if you have the authority or right to speak on a subject. It's mostly important to point out the mentioned concept of civil war here, a future civil war, as the reality of the future flies out the window very soon and is instead replaced by the past. Take note of how she doesn't like the Americans commenting on the UK or anything else in Europe. This will come up later as well. Lastly, for this section, she says the UK is not a dystopia, while also mentioning that she disagrees with the thought policing and says that she has written articles about censorship of free speech being bad, which kind of makes it sound like a dystopia. It's also something Musk was wrong about, as he presumed that she was in favor of censorship, that he presumed their entire company was in favor of censorship.
Because the UK has actually been very good at integrating immigrants. The UK is very effective at doing that. There are problems. I'm the first to admit that there are problems.
Yes, there are major problems.
There are problems, but it really is not what you are describing to or suggesting to your 240 million followers it is.
I think it is.
And I think there's a problem.
No, I think I'm spot on.
We'll have to...
And that's why you have freedom of speech, or at least
freedom of speech allows people
UK.
to say things that are wrong. But your point is not that you're not just saying I have every right to say what I want. You're saying, I am right about Europe, and I really don't think you are.
I think I am.
I think you will find that most people in Europe, or many people in Europe, don't think you're right about it. But let's come to that.
Yes, because the media keeps ignoring reality.
I don't think that's true either.
And they're programmed by the TV and conventional media.
You can clearly sense her indignancy over this, a point for patriotism, I suppose, but listen closely and you can hear that it's also about Musk's fame. Jealousy, I wonder? Perhaps she's angry that he could simply buy a megaphone louder than any news outlet, or maybe she thinks he's just wrong about England, but that begs the question, what about the Brits saying the same thing? Will they be dismissed with accusations of fascism as well? And to her point regarding England, I think she might be ashamed if she understood the truth proper. It is not that an atrocity happens, but that it is allowed to happen.
And why are you... This is, I guess, even to me, sort of the bigger picture question. Why do you focus on this? Why are you interested in it? Because on the one hand, we started this conversation and you described to me this extraordinarily transformative, amazing, sort of, civilizational changing stuff that's happening in the next 10 years.
Yes.
And yet you're also, an ongoing participant in the worst kind of tribalism, cesspit of social media. Like, how does that fit? Are you, on the one, they're two very different views of the world.
Yeah, I don't think they're inconsistent.
But why do you do the latter one, the tribalism? I mean, people say that you're a racist. People say that you're, there's all kinds of things said about you, which I'm sure you would disagree with. But I just don't understand. What is the motivation for doing that? Are you fomenting?
My partner is she's half Indian, and and I have 4 children with her.
So here she's trying to draw a contrast between Musk's opinions to make him look petty, like he should only focus on space or whatever, but it's her interview, and she's the one asking the questions, so she's the one leading him to a point where she can point out the starkness to begin with. The thing is, there is no discrepancy. He's interested in continuing humanity into the future. Then what is so shocking about him having an opinion on the continuation of the civilized world, be it borders or social politics? What good is a spaceship if our countries fall completely to liberalism or barbarism? She tried to paint him as the evil corporate man who's using his vast fortune to deliberately sow unrest in a foreign country, even referring to his website, X, as a cesspit. She brings up accusations of racism in this, asks if he's anti-Muslim, the whole 9 yards.
What worries me is that the people you are supporting are really quite vile people in some areas. Like some members of the AfD, Alice Weidel, whom I've met, is a perfectly thoughtful person, but in her party are some real neo-Nazis, are some really, really awful people. And your blanket support of this kind of party with 240 million followers means that you have a power in Europe that I think perhaps you don't realize the scale of impact you have. But you can...
Well, good. I hope I am having a big impact.
But why? Why should you? Why should you be able to shape European politics? You don't even live there.
I think of it as the sort of the West collectively.
But do you see why this makes people think that this man who has all this power, he's the world's richest man, he thinks he has a right to influence our politics? It makes people... It's why, we started this conversation saying superlatives. It's why people loathe you.
Why should he be allowed to shape European politics? Is it an honest question or envy? Forget Musk, why should she get to shape the politics of Europe? Because she's the editor-in-chief of The Economist? Does that give her a right? She says he doesn't live there, but she only lives in England, not every European country. Don't countless immigrants live there as well? Do they have a right to control the continent's politics? Do the illegals? It sure seems so. She states that some of the AfD, which is a more right-wing German party, that some of them were neo-Nazis. A very yes and moment. A normal person still has control over themselves, despite their beliefs. Being a racist doesn't make you unlawful by default. For that matter, believing in genetic differences between races doesn't even make you a racist. It's an empty accusation to say racist equal bad. Thoughts are not crimes. She's accusing them of being different, despite her being part of the party of diversity and inclusivity. In her claim against Musk, she's stretching the prerequisites of acceptability to include living somewhere, despite her not living from Germany. But in her attempt to silence Musk, she's also insinuating that those she's classifying as neo-Nazis shouldn't have the right to an opinion either, despite being Germans in a German political party. Cancellation is exactly what the left has been doing for years, and cancellation is what she's trying to do to Musk. and I suppose the AfD as well. She has no qualms with classifying people, Germans even, as Nazis, if it means silencing them. I would imagine that word has more weight in Germany, and even in the USA it gets you death threats. This narrative is less about right and wrong, and more about thought policing.
I mean, some people do loathe you.
Yes, some people do.
But do you understand why? Do you think what you're doing is helpful for Western democracy?
Maybe some people do loathe me. And that's probably true. I don't care. But the fact that, as you pointed out, 250 million people follow me is that I think a lot more people actually like me than don't. And I think a lot more people hate you and the media more than you realize.
There have been mistakes by journalists and journalism. I totally acknowledge that. But I also think that the kind of polarized environment, particularly on social media, fostered by the kinds of things you are pushing on X, actually helps this, makes it worse.
I don't think so.
Both of their arguments are simplistic here, but she's reaching beyond politics by citing admiration, and his response is based. This is a hard thing to allow yourself to accept. Humans naturally want to be loved, not hated. All the more difficult for someone in the limelight. I believe that the Musk of yore was desperate for love and attention. He seemed to pride himself on Tesla being a very positive place for LGBTQ workers and such, but I doubt he cares if one of his workers is gay or trans, and he clearly went from someone the left loved to someone they absolutely despise. And then he was part of Doge, and a lot of right-wingers got ruffled by him as well. Now he's relentlessly accused of many things. Now he seems to have found himself somewhere in the center. Now he ends this segment on that stinger, because there's absolutely nothing the media can do but accept that hatred for them is universal and overwhelming, a shared legacy through a combined failing. Musk and his cesspit feel closer to normal for us, closer to real. We'd rather be slinging mud than watching a rerun of a puppet show. She's desperate to land a blow, to use popularity polls as evidence of wrongdoing. She's trying to gaslight him. Being agreeable does not make someone a good person. Being popular does not make someone wrong. She's trying to guilt trip him, like a mother asking their son if he understands why it's wrong to steal another kid's toy, expecting him to look down at his feet and cower. But Musk simply returned the gift to sender. What can the mass media say about popularity when they're the antagonist of a school dramedy?
But what we stand for, as you know, is liberal values, traditional, classical liberal values, where we worry about concentrations of power and we believe in the individual and the dignity of the individual and individual freedom.
Right. I agree with that.
Firmly believe that. And I have long thought that you were a classical liberal. But when I read what you post, classical liberal, J.S. Mill, limited government, individual freedom.
Yeah. I agree with that.
But when I read what you post on your feed, I sometimes wonder whether you really do believe in that.
A rather odd challenge that she's made here. She's talking about classical liberalism whilst accusing him of things that have little to do with it, like immigration and popularity. Yes, classical liberalism mentions individual freedoms and property rights, but mostly through restricting government, and few people these days are so delusional as to believe in a fairy tale in the era of science. The world is not so large anymore, and the short-sighted, the borderline blind ideology of classical liberalism is nothing but a footnote of the past, from before electricity was harnessed. Then, after straining her stance, she suggests that he does not believe what he himself says, and this is ultimately where any kind of debate or negotiation starts to break down. When you replace the other party's words with your own imagination is when you lose credibility. That's when anyone can do the same to you. It's when there's no point conversing. Thus far, Zanny's only censure of Musk has been his wealth, his popularity, and his geographic location, but now she's telling him that what he posts on X proves his words contradictory to his own beliefs. But that's according to her interpretation of justice, a liberal's interpretation. Musk is playing a different game, with different rules. If one were to ask who's more hypocritical, she praised the UK's integration of immigrants and is also in favor of strong borders.
Yes.
Safe cities? Much more dangerous in the US than the UK. Sensible spending, bigger deficit here, out of control. You failed to reduce it. Secure borders now under the Trump administration. I agree with you. Before not, but on 2 out of 3, unequivocally, Europe is in a better place. Yet you seem to paint a picture of Europe being a hellhole.
I don't think Europe's a hellhole.
Okay, we can agree on something.
When did I ever say that?
Well, the picture you paint of Europe
No,
on X
you're making up things.
No, I'm not.
You're just literally making it up.
You say civil war in Britain is inevitable, and then you basically proselytize for this citizen vigilante film, which really does paint Europe as a hellhole. It just starts with ominous music, and it says Europe.
Well, there was out of control rape and murder.
It's more dangerous in this country than it is in Europe.
Again, you can hear something akin to patriotism leaking out of her, but it's closer to self-righteousness. Here she missteps in her usage of UK and Europe interchangeably, as she more or less does for the entirety of this interview, but Europe isn't a country. Perhaps it's a simple mistake, or perhaps she sees Europe the same way Musk, and I see Europe, as the collective West, as he said. By the way, that includes Canada and Australia, at least in my mind, but even then, she's ignoring the blatant reality of statistics. If she's talking about the UK versus the USA, the differences are so gargantuan that there's no point bragging. However, even compared to Europe, there's huge differences, which I'll bring up later. But here's the question. For how long are they safe? She pointed it out before. What Musk has been saying, what I have been saying, what we're all saying, it's not about now. It's about when. A civil war, a hostile takeover, the moment before the bombs drop is undoubtedly more quiet than the moment after, and there is no pride to partake of a short-lived peace on the Hell March. Yet, here she is talking about the present and even the past regarding statistics, which is very common for leftists. If you want to talk about danger, you have to talk about what that danger is and why, which Musk nails, and then she attempts to follow up on.
I think the prevalence of guns has quite a lot to do with it too. I mean, this is a much more dangerous country. Murder rates are much higher, in large part because there are so many guns.
Well, let me give you an interesting number. There are more people that die in Europe from heat deaths than people that die from gun deaths in America. Why aren't you writing an article about air conditioning?
Well, we've done several on air conditioning, and we had on our cover last week a whole long piece about why
pro air conditioning.
Yeah, we're very pro air conditioning.
Okay, good. Well, good.
Very pro.
Good
You should read us. Absolutely.
So, credit where it's due. Credit's where it's due.
I think you have a view of the Economist that is not entirely accurate.
The point is not that the question is not is America perfect. The question is does Europe have a serious and growing problem?
The question
Absolutely,
is which is more dangerous. That's where we started this.
Europe has a serious and growing problem. I'm not going to say that the United States has no problems. Of course it does. But we should all try to address these issues.
We can agree on that. We should all try to address the problems. My point was simply that I think you exaggerate the scale of Europe's problem, and that
I think people are asleep at the switch and do not realize the magnitude of the issue.
And there's the inevitable insistence that evil would not manifest if not for a gun. But let's not forget Henry Nowak, who was sacrificed with a ceremonial blade longer than what any Englishman would be allowed to carry. Let's not forget that was a result not of a constitutional right, but rather a newborn liberal mentality that manifested specifically because Democrats refused to stop a foreigner from doing whatever they want to do. And Henry Nowak wasn't the only one. This is a mentality that gives foreigners privilege, which is the exact crux of any kind of racism, sexism, and religious tensions. Inequality. Let's not forget that this same mentality is what allowed mass migration in the first place. If we're talking about weapons, yeah. In America, everyone but ex-convicts get guns, so shootings happen more commonly. The catch is that everyone can have them, making the circumstances of Nowak's death far more radicalizing, and the police's careless response a far greater signal of corruption. For that matter, the concept of safety or gun violence doesn't necessitate weapons at all, does it? Wait a minute. Why are they even talking about this? Oh, right. Lacking a tangible argument, she backpedaled and twisted Musk's speech about immigrations, Islam, and the future of Europe's being a civil war, and made it instead about violence in general, and then twisted it further, claiming that violence happens more in America for some reason, even though she doesn't live in America. In reality, the problem of violence in America is far more nuanced. It's too long-winded to get into, but it's primarily because it's a single massive country and it's monolinguistic, unlike Europe. Not that it matters. Her comparison to America is simply an attempt to switch which cup the ball is hidden under, which Musk noticed, actually, and tried to course-correct from. The point is not the violence itself, but why it happens. what it's working towards. This is effectively where the interview ends. It's mostly repetition from here on out, aside from her noteworthy claim that Europe is a rapidly aging continent that benefits from immigration, another claim she's made about foreign countries, despite not living there. And by this, I assume she means the low birth rates, which isn't some sort of magical hex, but rather a result of many human-made problems, which again is too much to go into here, primarily having to do with a gender war. Otherwise, the debate degrades into commentary about authoritarianism and fascism, with Musk insisting that he's normal and the so-called extreme right are normal as well. Again, I love this interview. It perfectly displays a normal woman and a normal man's views on politics. No deep philosophy and very little pulling of statistics. It's just the anecdote of their life, their lived experience brought forth into words, or let me be more exact, the lived experience of two privileged white people brought into words. And I don't mean to offend with privilege, only to confer that they are people living with an abundance of freedom and peace, forming their personal judgments about the world they see, but do not necessarily engage with. This is normal for people in the first world, even if they aren't rich. They're just having a normal debate, and what it shows is that the normal man wants to defend most of the traditionalist values that have worked for all of recorded history, and which seem to be reasonable to him, even if it makes some people unhappy, because he perceives progressivist ideals as destructive, and to that end he is advising another country of what he thinks will work for them and providing them a voice to speak where they would otherwise be squelched by their liberal government. At the same time, the normal woman wants to continue progressing towards what appears to be a bleak future, or perhaps she simply cannot perceive it as worsening, insisting that her neck of the woods is better than the man's explicitly because of her self-indulgent empathy, which the man has cast off, and to justify it, she acts to deflect attention away from her stained dress and to redirect the accusation towards another country's unrelated problem, the greasy barbecue stain that is America's heavy gun violence, almost all of which is initiated by Americans and not foreigners. It's exactly how I would imagine such a conversation to go. To be fair, she does agree on borders, but I don't know exactly what she means here because most liberals think everyone should get a free passport, visa, and hotel room. Plus, she lives on an island, and there too is the hypocrisy. She repeatedly comments about Europe and America as well, despite the fact that she doesn't necessarily live there. She lives in England. And I just thought it was a really, really great interview, a great debate, a great just conversation, whatever you want to call it. Two normal people. This is what normal people sound like. Neither of them are crazy. One might be wrong, one might be right, but neither of them are extremists. And all of the clownish stuff that people are trying to pull to get certain votes, to try and enforce certain mentalities, that's what really needs to be squelched. That's what needs to be stomped out. And it needs to be stomped out by both parties. But we also need to be careful of the accusations, as she keeps accusing anyone with an ideal that she doesn't agree with of being fringe. And you hear other people saying the same thing, the hard right, the extremist right, the radical right. It's not always wrong. There are radicals, but something to be careful of. Anyway, thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed, please like and subscribe, do all the YouTube things, and I will link the whole interview down below if you want to watch it. I think it's an hour and 41 minutes, something like that. So it's quite a long one, but most of what I cut out was the first half. So enjoy.